Hello, good morning. Thank you for coming to the transition meeting regarding statewide services in Maine. My name is Kevin Bolin. I work in the public school outreach as a coordinator at the Maine Educational Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. I'm thrilled to have a variety of individuals come and share their resources and what is available here statewide to support kids in their transition process. Typically it starts in about 6th grade and lasts into their post-secondary or career. The first presenter will be myself, Kevin Bolin, and then I will hand it over to my colleague, Shana Kelly Cohen. First, I'd like to share some general statistics about Maine and how they rank nationally. These statistics have been shared by the National Deaf Center on Post-Secondary Education, which happened in the University of Texas, so I'm grateful to them for them sharing that data. Looking at this top row is the nationwide statistics, and the bottom row is looking specifically at Maine. So looking at educational attainment and levels of degrees that are completed, nationwide, the deaf population is represented in blue, whereas the hearing is in green. So nationally, 82% of deaf students graduate from high school, and in Maine, it's 87, which is a wonderful statistic. Now looking at all graduates, deaf compared to hearing, we see a little bit of a discrepancy. So 87% of deaf students will graduate as opposed to 94% of hearing students. And looking at post-secondary, the some college category is perhaps 1 to 2 years or so. Nationwide, about half, 49% of deaf students go on to some college, and it's a little lower here in Maine at 47%. But looking at, in Maine, the amount of hearing students who go is 63%. Looking to those who get a bachelor's degree, nationwide, 17% of deaf students will get that, whereas in Maine, it's 16%. So that's on par, but we'd like to see that go up a little bit. Now, comparing it with your hearing to deaf population here in Maine, it's 31% to 16%, nearly double the amount. And then looking at post-bachelor's degree, it could be a master's courses or going on to a PhD. Nationwide, deaf students are about 6%, and here in Maine, we're on par, having 6% as well. But then comparing to their hearing peers, there are 10% who have post-bachelor's degrees. Now, looking specifically at high school completion, as I had mentioned earlier, we look at nationwide is 82%. Here in Maine, we are above the national average with 88%. Thinking about post-high school and going on to work, the top line, again, is the national statistics, and the bottom line is Maine. Looking again at blue, nationally, 49% of, let me make sure I'm saying this correctly, of deaf individuals are employed. There are 73% employed nationally who are hearing. Looking specifically at Maine, we are on par where 49% of deaf individuals are employed and 74% of hearing individuals are employed. So Maine is pretty close to the national average. And looking at employment nationwide, it's about 50%. So deaf individuals are below the national average for deaf and hard of hearing around employment opportunities and achievement post-high school. and by 23% actually. So we've talked about different statistics, both nationally and here in Maine, and considering how we want to improve our status so that deaf and hard of hearing individuals do have the opportunity to complete high school, whether they go on for vocational training, college training, or directly into the job market. There are a lot of different ways that individuals can do that post-high school stuff. You can do outreach through the Maine Educational Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, Governor Baxter's School for the Deaf. There are ways that we can invest in our young people to see them succeed. Thinking specifically within the family, as parents and family members, you need to keep in mind something very important in health and development for children. I represent that through SPICE: social, physical, intelligence, communication, and emotion. So if a child is missing one of these aspects, it could become a barrier for their successful transition to their life after high school. I had mentioned earlier about the public school outreach program here at MECDHH, and so I'd like to give a little bit of information about what the purpose is of our department. And so the purpose of the statewide public school outreach program is to assist service providers in offering beneficial and positive educational experiences for students statewide. So you may wonder what PSO may be able to offer to you and your deaf students. We can provide SDI, specially designed instruction, which means that teachers for the deaf and hard of hearing can work one-on-one with the student. Sometimes we'll provide classroom or outside the classroom consultation to improve accessibility for those deaf and hard of hearing students. We have experts who can provide that consultation. Sometimes your school districts might be struggling to find interpreters or transliterators or even sub-interpreters. There is a shortage, generally speaking, and it's hard to be able to keep them on board. So we can help coordinate and hook you up with a lot of different resources statewide. We do provide evaluations or assessments, and those evaluations and assessments can be critical in providing the educational team with more information and how to offer your child a successful transition. We have a lot of variety of equipment support, whether it be within the school system. So for example, FM, RM systems and so on. Sometimes teachers or families need a little support or more education about communication-wise or more access and maybe perhaps the child's learning style. So we can also provide some trainings around that. Currently, as I had mentioned before, students also need that social emotional education. Statewide, a lot of these students are the only deaf or hard of hearing student in their district or in their school. So we host a variety of social events that allow deaf students to come together and share their shared experiences of being the only deaf or hard of hearing student in their environment. And what we're talking about today is transition support. We also provide some of that. You know, a lot of school districts may not be sure how to support a student who is deaf or hard of hearing after they leave those doors. So that's where we can provide with our wonderful collaboration, and you'll meet some of those other resources in today's presentation. But you know, here in the state of Maine, we do require students to take the PSAT in order to graduate. So often standardized tests are challenging for certain populations, and so we want to help students prepare for the PSAT. We have a lot of different staff who'd be able to offer that one-on-one PSAT study guide, tutoring, study groups with others. So we're very excited to be able to provide support for the long run. I'd like now to hand it over to my colleague, Shana Kelly Cohen. She will speak more about the public school outreach program, and how we can provide more intense IEP and transition support.
Okay, hello. My name is Shayna. Thank you so much, Kevin, for inviting me here. So far, my background has been clinical social work, and my role here is at Baxter School for the Deaf, as well as transitional programs, and starting about 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, all the way through high school. I help work with some of the middle school programs here, which is also here in Portland, and we collaborate with Portland Public Schools. And we have a lot of students here, K through 12, and we have a variety of teachers. We also have deaf teachers, and we have people who are also fluent in American Sign Language. Some are hearing, some are deaf, some are hard of hearing. We have a mix of staff who also has different role models. They're showing language to children who are deaf and hard of hearing. So today I'm talking a little bit about my role and support as far as transitions. So starting with IEPs, I would say that starts about 8th grade, and then we go more in depth and we talk about it, and here's what it looks like. So the IEPs themselves, the actual documentation in the state of Maine, is the same. It starts from 3 until they're 20 years old. But starting their freshman year, about 16 years old, whichever one happens first, we do have a final chapter at the end that's called Transition. And even though the paperwork has been filled out at the very end, there's a section that we have to think about primary first. So that is what we discuss first in the IEP meeting. Some of you possibly have a 504 plan, and that will look a little bit different depending on the individual, and we can talk about that too. So the IEP transition plan means that your student is going to have the opportunity to be able to discuss with the staff at the school what their interests are, what their skills are, and thinking about what they want to do when they look at possible job or career opportunities or college, different opportunities in their future. So we're discussing with parents while we're in the IEP meeting, and we're also asking the student to attend the IEP meeting, because there's a lot possibly. We can start about 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We can start asking the kids to consider what they are passionate about and what they want to do. We can ask the parents as well and see what their opportunities are and what interests they have. But also we want to see the students' preferences, and we want to see what other kind of assessments we need. And it's a great opportunity for the student themselves to be able to self-advocate as well as understand the full process. So we have to think about their educational plan, academically, what they need. So starting freshman year in high school, it's really best, if possible, and what's appropriate if the student is able to fully join the entire meeting. That way that they have exposure to the IEP and they can accept it. Now, the IEP compared to ADA, maybe some of your students are a junior or a senior and they're thinking about college. The IEP does have an IDEA, and it's a law, and we can talk about what that looks like. It's K through 12. It's for the educational program, but ADA was determined to support services for college needs. So it's a little bit different, and we have resources, and we're hoping that they'll be available for all of you. I don't need to go in depth into ADA today, but I promise the expectations are different. So the advocate support needs are different for the K through 12, and the students, we also have to see what it looks like. They're learning at a different level, and we also need to know, depending on the student and what their needs are, they will request different services, and they need different services. Maybe they need an interpreter or a tutor or possible extra support or a note taker. There are many different resources available to them, but the student needs to know what they can ask for and what services they're able to acquire. So at the end, it's really important for the educational transition team to be able to collaborate together in order to support the student, and that includes academic models. It could be teachers like teachers of the deaf. It could be educational team teachers. It could be a case manager for the IEP. Also, we say case managers, CM, for different presentation and the community and outreach, as well as presenters. We have resources and important people who can also come and become mentors, or parents who can decide. You can invite to a child's IEP, you can invite someone from the community that you feel is necessary in order to collaborate services for your student. So academically, you need to think about your child's rights and who you want to invite to the school's IEP, and that's important to invite them. That way they have permission.